princess and the gardener's boy were playing in the backyard. "What would you like to do when you grow up, Princess?" asked the gardener's boy. "I should like to marry you, Tom," said the princess. "Would you mind?" "No," said the gardener's boy. "I shouldn't mind much. I'll marry you if you like, if I have time." For the gardener's boy meant, as soon as he was grown up, to be a general and a poet and a prime minister and an admiral and a civil engineer. Meanwhile he was top of all his classes at school and tip-top of the geography class. As for the Princess Marianne, she was a very good little girl, and everyone loved her. She was always kind and polite, even to her Uncle James and to other people she did not like very much, and though she was not very clever for a princess, she always tried to do her lessons. Even if you know perfectly well that you can't do your lessons, you may as well try, and sometimes you find that by some fortunate accident they are done. And then the princess had a truly good heart. She was always kind to her pets. She never slapped her hippopotamus when it broke her doll in its playful gambols. She never forgot to feed her rhinoceroses in their little hutch in the backyard. Her elephant was devoted to her, and sometimes Marianne made her nurse quite cross by smuggling the dear little thing up to bed with her and letting it go to sleep with its long trunk laid lovingly across her throat and its pretty head cuddled under the royal right ear. When the princess had been good all through the week, for like all real live nice children, she was sometimes naughty, but never bad, Nurse would allow her to ask her little friends to come on Wednesday morning early and spend the day, because Wednesday is the end of the week in that country. Then in the afternoon, when all the little dukes and duchesses and marquises and countesses had finished their rice pudding and had their faces and hands washed after it, Nurse would say, "Now, my dears, what would you like to do this afternoon?" just as if she didn't know, and the answer would always be the same. "Oh, do let's go to the zoological gardens and ride on the big guinea pig and feed the rabbits and hear the dormouse asleep." So their pinafores were taken off, and they all went to the zoological gardens, where 20 of them could ride at a time on the guinea pig, and where even the little ones could feed the great rabbits if some grown-up person were kind enough to lift them up for the purpose. There was always some such person, because in Rotundia everybody was kind, except one. Now that you have read as far as this, you know, of course, that the kingdom of Rotundia was a very remarkable place, and if you are a thoughtful child, as of course you are, you will not need me to tell you what was the most remarkable thing about it. But in case you are not a thoughtful child, and it is just possible, of course, that you are not, I will tell you at once what was most remarkable about it. All the animals were the wrong sizes, and this is how it happened. In olden times, when all our world was just loose earth and air and fire and water mixed up anyhow like a pudding, spinning around like mad trying to get different things to settle into their proper places, a round piece of earth got loose, and it went spinning away by itself across the water, which was just beginning to try to get spread out smooth into a real sea. And as the great round piece of earth flew away, going around and around as hard as it could, it met a long piece of hard rock that had gotten loose from another part of the pudding mixture. And the rock was so hard and was going so fast that it ran its point through the round piece of earth and stuck out on the other side of it. So the two together were like a very, very much too big spinning top. I am afraid all this is very dull, but you know geography is never lively, and after all I must give you a little information even in a fairy tale, like powder in a jam. Well, when the pointed rock smashed into the round bit of earth, the shock was so great that it set them spinning together through the air, which was just getting into its proper place, like all the rest of the things. Only, as luck would have it, they forgot which way they were going, and they began to spin the wrong way. Presently, Center of Gravity, a great giant who was managing the whole business, woke up in the middle of the earth and began to grumble. "Hurry up," he said. "Come down and lie still." So the rock with the round piece of earth fell into the sea, and the point of the rock went into a hole that just fitted into the stony sea bottom. And there it spun round the wrong way 7 times, and then lay still. And that round piece of land became, after millions of years, the kingdom of Rotundia. This is the end of the geography lesson. And now for just a little natural history, so that we may not feel that we are quite wasting our time. Of course, the consequence of the island having spun round the wrong way was that when the animals began to grow on the island, they grew the wrong sizes. The guinea pig, as you know, was as big as our elephants, and the elephant, dear little pet, was the size of the silly tiny little dogs that ladies sometimes carry in their purses. The rabbits were about the size of our rhinoceroses, and all about the wild parts of the island they made their burrows as big as railway tunnels. The dormouse, of course, was the biggest of all the creatures. I can't tell you how big he was. Even if you think of elephants, it will not help you at all. Luckily, there was only one of him, and he was always asleep. Otherwise, I don't think the Rotundians could have borne with him. As it was, they made him a house, and it saved them the expense of a brass band, because no band could possibly have been heard when the dormouse was talking in his sleep. The men and women and children in this wonderful island were quite the right size, because their ancestors had come over with the Conqueror long after the island had settled down and the animals grown on it. Now that the natural history lesson is over, and if you have been attending, you know more about Rotundia than anyone there did, except 3 people: the Lord Chief Schoolmaster, the Princess's uncle, who was a magician and knew everything without learning it, and Tom, the gardener's son. Tom had learned more at school than anyone else, because he wished to take a prize. The prize offered by the Lord Chief Schoolmaster was a history of Rotundia, beautifully bound, with the royal arms on the back. But after that day when the princess said she meant to marry Tom, the gardener's boy thought it over, and he decided the best prize in the world would be the princess. And this was the prize Tom meant to take. And when you are a gardener's son, and you've decided to marry a princess, you will find that the more you learn at school, the better. The princess always played with Tom on the days when the little dukes and marquises did not come to tea, and when he told her he was almost sure of first prize, she clapped her hands and said, "Dear Tom, dear good clever Tom, you deserve all the prizes, and I will give you my pet elephant, and you can keep him till we're married." The pet elephant was called Fido, and the gardener's son took him away in his coat pocket. He was the dearest little elephant you ever saw, about 6 inches long, but he was very, very wise. He could not have been wiser if he had been a mile high. He lay down comfortably in Tom's pocket, and when Tom put in his hand, Fido curled his little trunk around Tom's fingers with an affectionate confidence that made the boy's heart warm to his little pet. What with the elephant and the princess's affection and the knowledge that the very next day he would receive the history of Rotundia beautifully bound with royal arms on the cover, Tom could hardly sleep a wink. And besides, the dog did bark terribly. There was only one dog in Rotundia. The kingdom could not afford to keep more than one. He was a Mexican lapdog of the kind that in most parts of the world only measures 7 inches from the end of his dear nose to the tip of his darling tail. But in Rotundia He was bigger than I can possibly expect you to believe. And when he barked, his bark was so large that it filled up all the night and left no room for sleep or dreams or polite conversation or anything. He never barked at things that went on in the island. He was too large-minded for that. But when the ships went blundering by in the dark, rumbling over the rocks at the end of the island, he would bark once or twice just to let the ships know that they couldn't come playing about there any time they liked. But on this particular night he barked, and he barked, and he barked. And the princess said, "Oh dear, I wish he wouldn't. I am so sleepy." And Tom said to himself, "I wonder whatever is the matter. As soon as it is light, I will go and see."